The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Today is Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to begin with an update on the story we covered yesterday about 16-year-old Ralph-Yarl, who was shot last week as he accidentally rang the wrong doorbell. He was on his way to pick up his two siblings as instructed by his parents. The parents gave him an address, and Ralph went to the wrong address, the right street number, but the wrong street name. The correct street number, but the wrong street name, and he was shot in the head. He survived. He was shot in the head and then subsequently shot in the arm. The suspect, 84-year-old Andrew Lester, he was taken into custody at the time, but was released per Missouri law. This took place in Kansas City, Missouri. He was released, but subsequently arrested and formally charged. Now, he was not charged with a hate crime despite the obvious. This 84-year-old white man saw a 16-year-old child and a black child and immediately thought that he was a threat such that he shot the boy in the head. Now, this particular story operates on two different levels. The racial component, because clearly we are living in a time where a lot of white Americans are feeling cavalier. They're feeling like they can get away with murder. And this is not hyperbole. There are case after case across this country of white people literally not being charged. The most recent case that I've reminded you of yesterday was that of DJ Dominic Brodus, who was killed in Jacksonville, Florida, by a white man who spent a year in prison for obstruction of justice in that particular murder, but was not charged with murder. Cases all over this country of not just police officers getting away with the murder of black people, but ye old regular white person who is not deputized by the law getting away with murder. And while this had what officials said to be a racial component, according to CNN, the prosecutor says that in Missouri, a hate crime is a lower level felony, and adding such charges could constitute double jeopardy. A probable cause document released Monday evening similarly doesn't shine any light on why authorities believe race played a role in this case. And that was according to CNN, as reported by blackwithnochaser.com. This is, I want to juxtapose this with the other side of this. We do know fully well that to be black in this country is to be targeted on some level, and to see the severity of those levels increase when you put guns in the hands of white, old, conservative people, not just old, right? But when you put these guns in the hands of people who believe they are on a mission because they listen to nothing but right-wing propaganda all day long, that violence is going to act itself out against black people. And now it is acting itself out against white people. I have to juxtapose this story with the Saratoga County woman who was killed, Saratoga in New York, killed after turning into the wrong driveway. This, according to the Times-Union, a 65-year-old man has been charged with second-degree murder after police say that he shot at a car that had mistakenly turned into its driveway Saturday night. 20-year-old Kayla Gillis from Saratoga County was killed, a 20-year-old white girl. So it's not just the racism. The racism is an added complication and danger for black people. You're far more likely to have a white conservative pull a trigger on you if you are a black person. But we are such a gun-crazed society that these folks are killing their own. He goes out, a 65-year-old man goes out and kills a young white girl. I'm sorry. It just appears to me that this country is so committed to the spirit of vengeance and to the levels of violence where they are willing to open fire before they get any information because they have been worked up into a frenzy by conservative media. They have been worked up into a frenzy by their organizations, their militias, the Proud Boys, literally an organization that is training incels and young white men, other young white men, to fight a second civil war. They're out in the woods of various cities around this country, literally training for a second civil war. You add that on top of the propaganda that you get from the likes of Tucker Carlson and Fox News, who constantly push the drumbeat of violence coming from inner city urban communities. And so when a white person sees a black kid, teenager, knock on his door, he didn't, I mean, do you shoot at the first delivery person that comes to your door? Does a person, I was going to say, and I forgive me because this just crossed my brain. I was going to give this man the benefit of the doubt and say, well, maybe if he saw a FedEx uniform, he wouldn't pull the trigger. But go with me down to Mississippi, Brookhaven, Mississippi, where DeMontario Gibson, a FedEx driver in a FedEx truck, was chased down by white residents and shot at. Thankfully, he survived. So I was going to say that this kind of scenario maybe could be alleviated if the person had on a delivery uniform, because it seems to me to be extremely ridiculous to be a country so committed to violence, so committed to racial violence, that it would just open the door and shoot a person at the door, no questions asked. Like, would they do that to a delivery driver? And the answer is yes, right? I had to correct myself in the mid-thought because clearly we have already had an example of how far this violence goes in this country. It is both racial violence and it is also violence that's just gun violence, just general gun violence that is precipitated by the fact that we have a bunch of scared old white men sitting in their homes with their guns, playing with their guns, watching Fox News. And when somebody opens the door, somebody accidentally or knocks on the door, somebody accidentally has to turn to their driveway so that they can turn around. Do you remember? I don't know if you've ever been in the South, and in this case, the Saratoga County, that took place in New York. But in the South, there's certain parts of the neighborhoods that you simply cannot get out of unless you turn into someone's driveway. And every time we have to do that, I'm always thinking like, okay, let's hurry up and get the hell out of here, because chances are there's some white conservative behind that door with a gun. And now we see the pattern is repeating itself out. It's not once, it's not twice, but we see the racial component. And we see the simple reality that when you put a gun in the hands of someone like this, like these old white conservative men who I guarantee you had Fox News on their television, I guarantee you they are mass consumers of right-wing propaganda. And when the doorbell rang, this 84-year-old man saw ralph-yarl and shot him in the head. And somehow this young man survived. And unfortunately for the 20-year-old out of Saratoga County, New York, she did not survive. But this is indicative of the gun violence problem that we have. It is a clear indication of the racial problem that exists in this country. And it's most certainly an indication of stochastic terrorism, where conservative media fuels all day long, nonstop, fuels their listeners with the fear and the hate that is necessary for them to pull the trigger on a 16-year-old boy and on a 20-year-old young woman.
If you look at this whole special district, Walt Disney Corporation obviously owns a lot of it, but the district owns other land. And, you know, quite frankly, I wasn't even thinking about that land. This was not something that was really important one way or another. We just wanted them to live under the same rules, pay the debt, pay the taxes, all that stuff. Oh, but come to think of it, now people are like, well, what should we do with this land? And so, it's like, okay, people have said, maybe have maybe create a state park, maybe try to do more amusement parks. Someone even said, like, maybe you need another state prison. Who knows? I just think that the possibilities are endless, and so that is now going to be analyzed to see what would make the most sense, and that wasn't necessarily even on the radar.
That is the voice of Florida Governor Ronald DeSantis, as I believe he is digging his own grave in a very juvenile battle with Disney World. I am not surprised at the level of political blindness that one can get when they are deeply inserted into an echo chamber. But I am surprised that a person who has so much ambition to become the president of the United States can't see beyond the echo chamber. As you can hear in the video, you can clearly see in the video, he's surrounded by his yes men, and they're laughing and they're kikiing it up, while most political observers, whether they be commentators or just regular people, are looking at Ron DeSantis with disgust, because no one really thought he would go this far with a petty feud with Walt Disney World over the LGBTQ Don't Say Gay bill. This is how far he's willing to go. Now, here he's obviously joking and saying, oh, well, maybe we could do this. Maybe he's doing a trial balloon to see what sticks. And obviously, in the aftermath of this, there are conservatives all over the country who are just ripping him to shreds because, this is not a good look for conservatism. This is truly what conservatism is, mind you. This is conservatism. This is Republican ideology coming to fruition, coming into its own, coming into full blossom, full bloom. This is what they want. They want full control over every aspect of society. They expect every aspect of society, whether it be corporate America, whether it be Walt Disney World, or whether it be teachers in school, the conservative movement wants full control over society. They are seeking a totalitarian society. And Ron DeSantis is just dumb enough politically to say this publicly and reveal just how petty, how absolutely petty Ron DeSantis really is. And I think that's what's going to stick in terms of his reputation. The sheer pettiness and infantile, juvenile approach to politics. Why? Because Disney said something that you didn't like? Because Disney decided to oppose your Don't Say Gay bill in the state of Florida? Michael Steele is the former RNC chairman and former lieutenant governor of Maryland. He's a political analyst at MSNBC. He is a Republican, and this is what he said about it. He says, so, you want to analyze putting a state prison next to Disney? When families stop visiting and Disney's $75.2 billion economic impact and $5.8 billion tax revenue drop, its 75,000 employees face layoff and 463,000 jobs are also imperiled. What would your analytics tell you or say caused that to happen? WTF, Dumbo. And here's the other aspect of this. This is how Ron DeSantis is choosing to move forward even after Donald Trump dropped this ad last week entitled Pudding Fingers. This ad clearly defines Ron DeSantis as a sticky-fingered slob who wants to get his sticky fingers all over your Social Security and Medicare, right? That's how Ron DeSantis has been defined by Donald Trump. And what does Ronald DeSantis do in response? He goes further after Disney, as if that is the 100% best strategy to respond to this ad.
Ron DeSantis loves sticking his fingers where they don't belong. And we're not just talking about pudding. DeSantis has his dirty fingers all over senior entitlements, like cutting Medicare, slashing Social Security, even raising our retirement age. Tell Ron DeSantis to keep his pudding fingers off our money. Oh, and somebody get this man a spoon.
Make America Great Again, Inc. is responsible for the content of this advertisement.
I absolutely love that ad, by the way. 100% how you do American politics in the year of our Lord 2023. And Ron DeSantis said, I know what I'll do. I'll attack Disney even further. Ron DeSantis perhaps is going to go down as the single greatest meteoric rise and fall in terms of presidential potential. He has squandered it because of the level of success he was able to get in Florida with the majority in the House and the Senate there in Tallahassee. He has been able to achieve the majority of his goals, and that success has deluded him into thinking that the extremism that he is able to get away with in the state of Florida will play well all across the country. And as he dips his toes or his putting fingers outside of the state to try to become the nominee for the Republican Party for president, he's finding out very quickly that everything that plays well in Florida politics, everything that plays well in your echo chamber does not play well across the rest of this country. We'll be back right after this break.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and get twice the content and unfiltered interviews without any of the commercial interruptions. Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Welcome back. Yep. Welcome back. I want you to file this next story underneath the quintessential example, at least so far, of right-wing projection when it comes to the accusations of being groomers and pedophiles. We are unfortunately living in a political era where conservatives have found their most effective tool to be scapegoating and attacking the LGBTQIA movement, particularly the trans people in this country, and they attack them, and even just drag shows for that matter. Conservatives have been engaged in a nonstop, relentless attack against that community, labeling them as pedophiles and groomers just by their mere existence, right? If you are a drag queen, or if you are a gay person, or if you are a trans person, you are immediately labeled as a groomer. Turns out that what we say about conservatism is true. Every accusation is a projection. This, according to the Daily Beast, the Stop the Steal organizer, Ali Alexander, apologizes after being accused of asking teen boys for pictures of their penises. Now, that's the cleaned up version of the title. Go read it for yourself. This is a quote from Ali Alexander. This is what he said in response. He said, "I apologize for any inappropriate messages sent over the years." He is a former ally of President Trump. He was invited to speak by President Trump at the January 6th rally, right? This is the guy who organized Stop the Steal. He's one of the lead organizers of January 6th. He was invited to speak by Donald Trump, and that only did not happen because of Donald Trump aides stopping him at the last minute. He's also a good friend of Nick Fuentes, or at least I believe they're now at odds with each other because this information has come out and has harmed the white nationalist Nick Fuentes, who, according to Nick Fuentes' own supporters and according to the Daily Beast, Nick Fuentes did nothing to stop Ali Alexander from soliciting these nude photos from young boys in Nick Fuentes' audience. Again, let's go one step further. Maybe those names don't ring a bell, but Marjorie Taylor Greene has been engaged in a feud with this guy, Ali Alexander, after they fell out. And we don't quite know the details of their falling out because they used to be bosom buddies. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who likes to go on national television on 60 Minutes and call the Democrat Party the party of groomers and pedophiles, has a political friendship with someone who turns out to be an actual groomer. 15-year-old boys. young boys who are trying to work their way up in the Republican Party. There is a particular quote in this article that I want to read because I need you to understand the sickening methodology that is involved with grooming, period, no matter where it comes from. It is a tool that is used to take young people who are trying to get somewhere, accomplish something, to become something. Think of Harvey Weinstein and all of the young women that he used his power and influence over. Now adjust the age of the victim by at least a decade because Ali Alexander was targeting a 15-year-old. Multiple teenagers, but here's the account from the Daily Beast about one in particular that I just have to read to you. Quote, in 2017, Aiden Duncan, a 15-year-old boy in Colorado interested in right-wing politics, sent Alexander nude pictures after the MAGA activists asked him for them, according to an account Duncan gave in a March 2023 podcast appearance. While Duncan was a high school sophomore just starting out in politics, Alexander was a 32-year-old with a decade of political work for the Republican Party behind him, and now he was willing to share the connections he had gained through that work with Duncan, as long as the teenager met certain preconditions, including secrecy. Quote, "You'll have me sharing my entire network with you," Alexander told Duncan, according to Snapchat screenshots reviewed by the Daily Beast. This is the quintessential example of exactly what conservatives have been accusing everyone of. And don't think for a second that this is an isolated case or an isolated incident. This is the behavior pattern of too many adults, okay? I'm going to separate this now away from partisan politics because the issue of grooming and pedophilia goes far beyond that. All right. Now, there are many examples of conservatives protesting too much, of conservatives projecting what they actually do on everyone else. But this is a problem on this planet, generally speaking. The abuse of young people because some old person who was apparently not satisfied with the ability to talk to adults, consenting adults their own age. That just does not work for a subset of people on this planet, and they are both Republican and they are both Democrat. But in this particular instance, we are finding too many examples of Republicans who are waging a full-blown war against the LGBTQ community underneath the guise of protecting children to turning out to be the pedophiles and the groomers themselves. How many cases have we? I mean, there's an entire account. There are multiple accounts on Twitter that are dedicated to exposing the reality that conservatives who are trying to harm the LGBTQIA community are the actual culprits themselves. I don't even have to mention the Catholic Church, but I just did. The Evangelical, the Southern Baptist Church, the Mormon churches. All of these conservative institutions that are doing everything they can around the country to pass these anti-LGBTQ laws, they are the lead culprits in committing some of the most heinous crimes that you can imagine because of the damage and the trauma that these children live with for the rest of their lives.
You put us together, we'll make it happen. You put us together.
Listen to this clip from a Minnesota state senator by the name of Eric Lucero as he outlines perfectly, precisely the derangement that I am talking about. This uber religious commitment to attacking the LGBTQIA community while simultaneously we see the greatest examples of grooming and pedophilia coming right now from conservatives in this country. Take a listen into this absurdity.
Sin is real. Sin, S-I-N, is real. Sin is evil. Sin can exist in any institution. And we need to work hard as the Minnesota Senate to protect our young, vulnerable children's minds against these terrible, wicked, evil practices. And unfortunately, because all humans are subjected to potentially being corrupted by sin. We need to examine all institutions to prohibit such funds. There are practices out there that seek to groom and corrupt the minds of young children to engage in sexual perversion. And those wicked people manifest themselves in many different areas of our society. One of those areas that they have manifested themselves is in the areas of the arts. And I want to make sure that taxpayer dollars do not fall into the hands of these wicked, vile people that push sexual perversion, gender confusion, that might come to our capital and in displays of abomination parade themselves around the rotunda. And I do not want pictures, plays, theater, sculptures, or any other type of art to be used to channel the occult, to promote the occult or any of its variations, Satanism, and the wicked, evil practice of grooming young children, such as pedophilia.
You know what he's talking about? He's talking about drag shows here. They are having a debate on the House floor around funding, some type of funding that ostensibly goes to drag shows, and they are trying to make sure that the state has no paper trail of supporting drag shows. Now, the reason, obviously, is because they believe, conservatives want you to believe, whether they believe it or not, they want you to believe that drag shows are the real danger here, right? When we see that the real danger comes from these men, these conservative men who are seeking their desires in young people affiliated with their movement. We know for a fact that there have been more instances. In fact, can someone produce a single instance of a child being harmed at or around a drag show? But there are countless examples of children being harmed by these priests, by these pastors, by people who call themselves Christians. And as this opening speech, as he opened up his speech, rather, he was talking about sin, S-I-N, casting all of this in religious jargon. The greatest threat to our children is what happens to them when they go to these churches, when they go to these parochial schools, when they get around powerful people just like Ali Alexander, who used his power to solicit nude photos from a 15-year-old boy, literally exactly what they're trying to accuse everyone else of. The conservative movement is guilty of themselves. And again, I want to put this here one last time. This is, when we talk about grooming and pedophilia, this is a sickness of humanity that has to be dealt with. It is not a partisan issue, but what is happening right now is the scapegoating of the LGBTQIA community for the purposes of politics, when the real threat is not being addressed. I wish we would address the real problem. I really, let's slow down for a minute. If we were to actually address the problem of grooming and pedophilia on this planet, many of the people in power right now, especially conservative Christians, would be found guilty of the very thing that they are projecting onto everyone else. But that does not stop them. The hypocrisy doesn't slow them down. The hypocrisy is the point. The point is to use a vulnerable group as their scapegoat for the very things that they are doing. That's where we are. That's American politics. There's no regard whatsoever for the safety and the well-being of our children. Not for real. No. Only to the extent that they can be used for political gain. And we are living in that era right now, the period of time where the conservative movement is willing to use their children for political gain. Patrons, stay tuned. We have a half hour more to go. Everyone else, we'll see you tomorrow.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.